Autumn spread a carpet of amber leaves across the narrow streets of the small town, when Amelia, at 15, sat on the porch of the simple house, needle and thread between her small fingers. The colourful fabric slipped from and returned to her hands with the dexterity of someone who carried, unknowingly, the silent heritage of her grandmother Eleonora. She was sewing a small patchwork bag, her large bright eyes immersed in dreams still unattainable. Inside the house, Susan watched her daughter from afar, wiping her hands on the floral apron. Pride sparkled in her tired eyes, while her mind was already listing ways to support that shyly budding talent. A brief smile crossed her face, soon erased by the sound of Brandon, leafing through books impatiently. At 18, Brandon seemed to carry the weight of all the future days. Bent over a table cluttered with math notebooks, he studied as if his approval were the only thread capable of sustaining the family. Tension shaped every line of his young face, and his heavy breathing filled the silence of the house. Michael, the father, arrived home from work shortly after, still with his tie loose and fatigue etched into his body. When he saw his eldest son focused, he placed a firm hand on his shoulder, a gesture of approval that was rare and precious. A brief kiss on the forehead sealed the expectation that hung in the air, invisible but so dense it seemed to make the walls tremble. From the porch, Amelia watched the scene in silence. Her fingers gripped the fabric she was sewing more tightly, a slight tremor running through her hands. Without words, she understood that to be seen she would need to prove her worth in another way, and at that moment, she promised herself she would not give up. The years passed like pages of a book turning in the wind. Amelia grew up but never abandoned her passion. In the back of her shop, which was now her home, where she shared a room with piles of fabrics and colourful threads, each piece she created told a story. At 28, her delicate face still held that same hopeful glow, although now a few worry lines began to appear around her brown eyes. "It's perfect," exclaimed Olivia, her best friend, as she tried on Amelia's latest creation, a patchwork silk bag with delicate embroidery depicting wildflowers. "How do you manage to transform scraps that would have been thrown away into something so beautiful?" Amelia smiled, the brown hair falling in curls over her flushed face. "I learned from Grandma that nothing is truly useless. Every piece has potential. It just needs to find its right place." That same day, upon returning to the house where she grew up, Amelia found Brandon sitting in the living room, with his impeccable posture and the suit that looked like armour. At 31 years old, he was already a manager at an accounting firm, engaged to Rebecca, a respected doctor, and owner of an apartment in the best neighbourhood in the city. "How's the little shop going?" he asked, his tone bordering on condescending. "It's going well," replied Amelia, placing her box of materials on the table. "I sold some items this week." He murmured, adjusting the expensive tie. "I suppose it might be enough to buy a coffee, maybe." Susan entered the room at that moment, her hair now streaked with grey, but her smile as bright as ever. "Amelia, dear," Robert called. "He said he'll be here at 7. Amelia's face lit up at the thought of her fiancé. Robert had been a ray of sunshine in her life for the past 2 years. He believed in her talent, had helped set up her little store downtown, and together they dreamed of a future where her art could flourish. "Is the wedding still set for spring?" Brandon asked, checking his very expensive watch. "Yes," Amelia replied, a dreamy smile on her lips. "We will get married soon." Brandon nodded, but his gaze revealed doubt. "I hope you have a good plan B. Dreams are beautiful, but they don't pay bills." The small shop was located in a charming alley, between a cosy cafe and an old bookstore. Amelia had transformed the space with reclaimed wooden shelves, hanging plants, and soft lighting. Each piece had a unique touch. She lived in the back, making that place her home as well. As it turned out, things were not going so well. The bills started piling up. On a cold autumn morning, Amelia arrived at the shop to find an eviction notice posted on the door. Her world came crashing down. She tried to contact her fiancé, but Robert, once so present, became distant, always with excuses, and did not answer the calls. She became desperate and began to ponder her brother's words that dreams don't pay the bills. Maybe he was right. On the same day, when she was already at rock bottom, she received a message from Robert ending their relationship. "I can't build a future with someone who lacks stability. I got a job outside the country, I hope you understand," said the cold and impersonal text. In a few hours, everything crumbled. That breakup seemed so sudden. The bills, everything had collapsed. That night, alone in the shop, Amelia discovered that dreams could collapse like sandcastles. When she closed the accounts, she realized she was in much more debt than she had imagined. The rent was overdue, the suppliers were pressing, and now she didn't even have the man she loved to help her in the most difficult time. Sitting on the cold floor, surrounded by the creations she loved so much, Amelia finally understood the weight of Brandon's words over the years. Maybe she really was just a naive dreamer. The rain was still falling when Amelia rang the doorbell at her parents' house, a worn suitcase by her side. Susan opened the door and immediately enveloped her daughter in a silent hug that said everything. Michael appeared right behind her, his wrinkled face showing concern. "The store," he began hesitantly. "I closed it," replied Amelia, her voice choked. "I couldn't keep it running." "And Robert?" asked Susan, though she already knew the answer. Amelia just shook her head, unable to repeat the words of the breakup. Her father grabbed her suitcase, and together they entered the house that smelled of cinnamon and memories. "You can stay here as long as you need," Michael said, holding her hand. "We'll figure it out." That's when Brandon appeared on the stairs coincidentally. He had arranged to stop by that night to drop off something he had bought for his parents. Seeing Amelia with the suitcases, he had an expression of irritation. "What happened?" he asked, observing the boxes on the floor. Susan briefly explained the situation, seeking understanding with her gaze. Brandon was silent for a moment, then let out a bitter laugh. "It was obvious this was going to happen," he said. "Those who live on dreams eventually wake up one day." Michael asked his son to stop, but the young man continued, as if releasing years of accumulated resentment. "While I was studying all night, you were making your little bracelets. While I was working unpaid internships to build my resume, you were selling colourful cushions. And now, I have my life, my apartment, my career. And you're back at your parents' house." "Brandon," Susan reprimanded, horrified. "No, Mother. Someone needs to tell the truth. You have always been a burden to this family, Amelia. Do you think everyone can follow their dreams? The real world doesn't work like that." A deafening silence filled the kitchen. Amelia took a deep breath, feeling the hot tears rolling down her face. Slowly, she stood up. "Thank you for your honesty, Brandon," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I always knew what you thought of me, but I never imagined you would consider me a burden." Without another word, she picked up her bag and headed to the old room, leaving behind her dismayed family and Brandon, perhaps regretting having been so harsh. That night, lying on her teenage bed, Amelia cried all the tears she thought she had inside her. Her eyes burned, her chest was heavy, and for the first time she didn't even have the strength to dream. When the sun rose, there was no decision at all, just exhaustion, and a desolate silence where hope once resided. Lacking the spirit to resume sewing, she stashed her threads and needles at the back of the wardrobe. For months, she worked as a cashier at a neighborhood supermarket. The hours passed slowly amid the beeping of products and forced smiles. Her body was present, but her soul seemed constantly elsewhere, in another life she herself had buried. But the absence of sewing began to hurt, not abruptly, but like a longing that slowly infiltrates through the crevices of everyday life. She missed the sound of scissors cutting fabric, the smell of cotton, the feeling of creating something with her own hands. It was as if, by denying her craft, she was denying a part of herself. It was during an unassuming conversation with a friend that something rekindled. "You speak with your eyes when you talk about sewing, Amelia. That doesn't go away. it just falls asleep. Driven by this impulse, she decided to take the risk again, but with her feet on the ground. She rented a simple studio apartment and moved there. The place had peeling walls and a window that let the morning sun in. She returned to sewing, and with the first piece finished after the long hiatus, she cried. Not out of sadness, but out of reunion. She then remembered what her grandmother Eleonora used to say while sewing, with the wisdom of someone who had started over many times in life. Sometimes the thread breaks, Amelia, but it is always up to us to decide whether to leave the fabric torn or to start the stitch again. Her new collection was different, denser, more genuine, inspired by her grandmother's patterns, but reinvented with her own traits. Each bag was a small victory, made with different fabrics, colourful, some with prints, with repurposing and memory. They were pieces that carried not only fabric, but scars transformed into art. "You should share this online," suggested her co-worker, upon seeing the creations. People love stories of transformation and exclusive handmade things. With hesitation, Amelia created a social media profile. She photographed her pieces in the morning when the light was perfect and told the story behind each one. At first, only a few friends followed her. But then, something unexpected happened. Almost a year into this exhausting routine, a fashion influencer found her profile and was charmed by a specific bag, made with scraps from a patterned dress bought at a thrift store. It was a creative and very practical piece. Knowing Amelia's story and seeing her good taste, overnight, hundreds of people wanted a similar piece. In the following months, her venture grew organically and consistently. Amelia hired 2 local artisans to help her, forged partnerships with thrift stores, and became a reference in sustainable fashion in the region. Her parents visited her frequently. Brandon, however, kept his distance. The regret for what he had said that rainy night consumed him, but pride prevented him from seeking reconciliation. Time followed its relentless course. While Amelia's company flourished, Brandon's life took an unexpected turn. The company where he had worked for years announced a global restructuring. Entire departments were eliminated, including his. Brandon found himself unemployed for the first time in his life. The work friends, whom he discovered were not real friends, drifted away. The finance department became too heavy a burden, and Rebecca disappeared. At that moment of difficulty, and extremely embarrassed, he gathered the courage to call his parents. "Can I stay with you for a while?" he asked, his voice choked. "Of course, son," Susan replied without hesitation. "This will always be your home." When he arrived at the family residence, carrying a suitcase with his belongings, Brandon was greeted with warm hugs. His childhood room was ready to welcome him, clean and cozy. "I need some time to get reorganized," he explained, embarrassed during dinner. "I never imagined being in this situation." "We all go through tough times," Michael said gently. "The important thing is not to give up." That night, Brandon walked quietly through the house, observing the family photos in the picture frames. He paused at a recent one, showing Amelia in front of her new store, much larger than the first, with a radiant smile. He felt a mix of pride and regret that left him breathless. In the weeks that followed, Brandon sent out resumes and went to interviews without success. With each rejection, his self-confidence dwindled. Depression loomed, making it difficult even to get out of bed. Susan, concerned, called Amelia. "Your brother is not well," she confided. "He barely eats and hardly leaves his room." Amelia hesitated. The hurt from the harsh words still echoed in her memory, but something stronger, the love for family, the years of shared childhood, spoke louder. "I'll come by tomorrow," she promised. It was Christmas Eve, and the Hendersons' house was decorated simply. Twinkling lights on the porch, a modest tree in the living room, and the delicious smell of cinnamon cookies in the air. The doorbell rang at 6 in the evening. Susan opened the door to reveal Amelia, carrying gift packages and a basket of food. "Merry Christmas, Mom," she smiled, walking in. Michael hugged his daughter tightly. "I'm so glad you came, dear." Brandon remained in the room. Amelia took a deep breath, adjusted her hair, and knocked softly on the door. "Brandon? Can I come in?" There was no response. She slowly opened the door. The room was in dim light, the curtains closed despite the bright day outside. Brandon was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring into nothing, a shadow of the confident man he used to be. "Hey," Amelia said softly. "I brought your favorite cookie. Those chocolate ones with caramel drops, remember?" Brandon looked up, meeting his sister's eyes. Silence hung between them, heavy with years of unspoken words. "Why are you here?" he finally asked, his voice hoarse. Amelia sat down next to him. "It's Christmas, and you are my brother. After what I said, how can you even look at me?" She smiled, a gentle smile that reached her eyes. "Because I understand now. You always carried the weight of being the example, of never being able to make a mistake. I had the freedom that you never had." Brandon felt something break inside him, a dam of emotions held back for too long. "I was so unfair to you, so cruel." "We all say things we don't mean when we're hurt," she replied, placing her hand over his. "You were partly right. I lived in a dream world. I needed to fall to learn how to get up." "And look at you now," he said, a slight smile emerging. "A successful businesswoman." Amelia laughed. "A craftswoman who had faith. But I learned that success isn't just about money or recognition. It's about doing what we love and helping others along the way." The sound of Christmas music was coming from the living room. The smell of roasted turkey filled the house. "Come," invited Amelia, standing up. "Mom made her traditional recipe, and Dad is eager to see all of us at the table." Brandon stood up slowly. Instead of taking the extended hand, he surprised her, and even himself, by kneeling in front of his sister. "I'm sorry, Amelia," he said, tears now freely running down his face. "I spent my whole life thinking you were a problem, but you were always the strongest part of the family." Amelia knelt down too, embracing her brother with all her strength. "We're in this together, Brandon. We always have been." For a long moment the two remained like that, years of resentment dissolving in the warmth of that embrace. When they finally got up and moved to the living room, they found their parents watching from the slightly open door, also with tears in their eyes. The table was set, the food steaming. That Christmas night, as they exchanged stories and laughter around the family table, something new was born among them. Not just reconciliation, but genuine understanding. Each had followed their own path, faced their battles, and now returned home, not as winners or losers, but as imperfect and resilient human beings, and most importantly, there was a family to welcome them. "To new beginnings," proposed Michael, raising his glass. "And for the family," completed Susan. Brandon looked at Amelia with renewed respect. "For the courage to follow our dreams even when others doubt." "And for love," Amelia concluded. "That finds us at the right moment, even when we think we've lost it forever." Outside, the first star of the night shone through the window, a silent witness that sometimes we need to lose everything to discover how to walk the best path. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.